Namaste, welcome Bharat. I am Sania Yadav and you're watching Akhand News. On 28th February 2026, the United States and Israel initiated coordinated operations against the Iranian regime. The IEA's report of March 2026 shows that the crisis has led to a near halt in tanker movements to the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 20 million barrels per day of crude oil and petroleum product exports are currently disrupted, with limited alternatives to bypass what is considered the world's most critical oil transit choke point. Major supply reductions are being reported in Iraq, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. But how are the United States and Russia, two of the world's major oil and gas producers, being affected by these war-driven disruptions in global oil and gas supply? For the United States, the conflict has contributed to rising domestic fuel prices, and if tensions persist, they could further strain the domestic energy market of the United States. Data from the American Automobile Association highlights that the average gas price across the United States jumped 26 cents in just 1 week, rising $3.68 per gallon on 14th March. Overall gas prices have increased about 70 cents in the weeks after the war began. Meanwhile, rising fuel prices in the United States could push the government to expand domestic energy production, potentially increasing environmental risk. The Associated Press reported in the days after the war began that US Energy Secretary Chris Wright directed a Texas-based oil and gas company to restore operations along the Southern California coast in waters previously damaged by the Refugio oil spill in 2015. This order was issued under the National Defense Production Act of 1950, allowing government to expand the supply of critical minerals and services for national defense. Earlier in December 2025, California lawmakers Jared Huffman and Alex Padilla warned that any expansion along the coast could threaten the state's ecologically unique coastline. They described offshore drilling as a ticking time bomb and cautioned that any expansion along with the inevitable spill could be devastating for local communities. Now, turning to Russia, it could emerge as an alternative oil and gas supplier if global supply remained disrupted due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The IEA report indicates that Middle East conflict is creating the largest oil supply disruption in history, with global supply expected to drop by 8 million barrels in March 2026. Data reported by The Guardian shows that Russia earned €6 billion from fossil fuel sales in the 2 weeks after the war began, roughly gaining €672 million extra in March as coal, oil and gas prices rose 14% from February. At the same time, if global energy prices continue to rise, a temporary waiver of restrictions from Russian energy imports could occur. Before the Ukraine war, Europe was buying more than 40% of its gas from Russia. The loss of the European market during the war forced Russia to sell its oil and gas at steep discounts to Asian buyers, as reported by Al Jazeera. About a week after the war began, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent wrote on X, to enable oil to keep flowing into the global oil market, the Treasury Department is issuing a temporary 30-day waiver to Indian refiners to buy Russian oil currently stranded at sea. A few days later, Russian President Vladimir Putin signaled Russia's readiness to resume long-term cooperation with Europe. He said, if European buyers and European companies suddenly decide to reorient themselves and provide us with long-term sustainable cooperation devoid of political pressures, then go ahead. We have never refused. That's all for now. Thanks for watching Akhand News. I'm Sania Yadav. Namaskar.